Good morning, Lagos. Thank you very much indeed for staying tuned here on Smooth 98.1. It's time for Freshly Pressed 981, and I'm Ayo Mairese.
And I'm Valentine. Good morning.
Good morning. Okay, so we have our analyst with us, Tunde Okufi. Good morning. Tunde is at Big Coops on Twitter.
Morning, Niall. Morning, Valentine.
Good
Tunde
morning.
with strange phone ringtone. Good morning, Wade.
Good morning, Ayo. Good morning, Valentine.
Good morning.
Wade is at Reink Nigeria on Twitter. We are at Twitter on Smooth 91 FM. Please use the hashtag Freshly Pressed 981. We also have phone numbers on WhatsApp.
Yes, please send your messages for WhatsApp 08944400981. That is 0809 4440981. Use that hashtag freshly pressed 981. Also remember we're streaming live on YouTube. We'll take messages there.
Okay, so let's go on to our first story here. Wadi, I'll start with you. NDDC, that's the Niger Delta Development Commission, was so corrupt it was treated like an ATM, says Akpabio. This is from the Premium Times. Now, God's will Akpabio is the Minister of Niger Delta Affairs. He is the former governor of Akwa Ibom State, and he said corruption and political interference have disrupted the original purpose of Niger Delta Development Commission. Now, the NDDC was set up in 2000 by the administration of President Olusegun Obasanjo to fast-track development in the oil-rich Niger Delta region of Nigeria. But please take us to Ade, what he says the rot is in the, in the NDCC, why it's treated like an ATM, and just generally his feelings about it.
Well, let me start by saying that it is sad that after 19 years, the NDDC is still not doing what it's meant to do. However, I have a few things that I would ask, the minister about the NDDC. But before then, why he says that it's like an ATM is that they have about 12,000 abandoned projects.
Wow, that's 12,000.
12,000 abandoned projects across the 9 states who are the beneficiaries of the NDDC Commission.
Okay.
But the question is, aside, there are 9 states where you take monies from and put into the NDDC towards building infrastructure or other things across the 9 states. Akpabio was governor of Akwa Ibom State for 8 years. What did these governors do to ensure that NDDC was doing the right thing? Because a lot of all this development should come to those 9 states. Why is it 19 years after, or 8 years? How many years? Almost 8 years after his own tenure, that he realizes now as the minister that it was like an ATM. These abandoned projects, part of them were they not in his states? What did he do during that period to ensure that these projects were completed? There are quite a number of to ask. Aside from asking the NDDC, one of the things he says is that there should be a forensic audit. In as much as I agree,
well, the president had called for a forensic audit.
Yeah, but in as much as I agree for a forensic audit, the question will be, what has the NDDC been doing in the last 19 years? No, don't they prepare their accounts or their project statements or their project reports for all these things that they are doing, or they're just spending money without anybody knowing what they're doing? Akwabi also says one of the first things he's going to do is to ensure that there's a budgeting process. That's amazing.
Wasn't there a budgeting process in the past?
That was the first question I asked myself. I thought the first thing you do as a commission that is going to get money and spend money is to put in place a proper budget that would ensure that these things that you're doing are being being monitored, and you know how much is to be spent and how much is not to be spent. But going on and on, it just goes to show the way we take a lot of all these things for granted. Nobody's asking questions, and then all of a sudden you realize that this place is not working well, and you're comparing it to when you were governor and building roads. But some of these projects in your state were financed by the NDDC, and how did you check them? Are they up to standard? If you have 12,000 abandoned projects, are you telling me that there are no abandoned projects in his state?
And during his tenure. I mean, let's, even if we wanted to, he's moving forward now. He's talking about NDDC, 12,000. So after, let's say, 100 abandoned projects, they came for more money. You still gave them another 200 until he reached 12,000.
My point exactly. So what's the process? Like he says, you want to put in a budgeting process. This is 19 years after. If you don't have a budgeting process for the kind of monies that come into the NDDC, after 19 years. Wow.
Well, let's hopefully looking forward now. He's talking tough and he's saying no more game and ATM galore. He's going to be very strict with money and how it's allocated in NDC.
And if you recall, some 2 weeks ago, he allegedly rejected files that were sent to him, allegedly requesting payments from the NDDC. Fresh payments, seems like they come through those doors every day. But we'll move on.
All right, let's.
Especially with this message, from Patrick. Patrick sent this message on WhatsApp. Says spot on my sentiments in terms of the question for Mr. Fabio. A case of a kettle calling a pot black. I guess he wants to, actually just do the work
been
now.
washed. Yeah. There is scrubbing powder.
Thank you, Tunde. That's very important. All right, let me stay with you for this. INEC seeks establishment of electoral courts. New Telegraph. Now, when we're looking at the story before the show, we thought, I thought we had tribunals, but it's a bit different because I believe what the INEC chairman, Professor Mahmoud Yakubu, is asking for is that it shouldn't be under the responsibility of INEC.
Yes.
It should be a legislation where there's a separate court to address tribunal matters.
Yes.
Could you take us through
So
this?
I think a standing court, so to say, if that's the correct legal term. I think what we have now are as tribunals would sort of indicate, you create them. You create them on a needs basis. So something happens, and you set up this, tribunal. They may have standing members, but I don't think there is this standing structure consistently. And that's what the chairman of INEC is asking for. That look, it should be unbundled. It should be unbundled from INEC, so to say. And it's the same recommendation that we've had. We've had several committees. We like to waste money on committees for people to analyze, certain things that are as plain as day and obvious to all of us. But we
investigate
exactly, and then they buy cars and do everything that they do to come to conclusions that grade schoolers could have probably arrived at. And the argument is very simple. Today, INEC has to not just conduct elections, which is the obvious part of which is the logistics, move around election material, conduct the elections, take care of the staff, but then they're also burdened with malpractices. So they need to be able to investigate. They need to be able to surprisingly able to arrest and investigate, arrest offenders and investigate some of these issues. And it's a bit too much for them. As the chairman points out, they don't have, INEC, how do you execute an arrest? INEC doesn't have any policemen, for instance, right? So the argument is, look, there are existing institutions for this. One, my view is, instead of even creating something entirely different, can we use the existing institutions that we have to a better degree? And even, if we say that some focus should be made around this, then fine, let's do that. Let's make focus around, elections and look, government and elections seems to be the biggest industry in Nigeria. Let's put oil aside. It seems to be the most profitable industry anyway. So it needs the process for which politicians get into power. Obviously, needs a lot of focus. Yes. After each election cycle, we know Atiku is still in courts, for instance. Yes. So if some of these responsibilities were unbundled from INEC, perhaps INEC can then just focus on the business of just conducting the elections and let these other institutions, play their part, and then have a focused standing court that would take care of electoral matters, and perhaps they would move through the courts a lot quicker than they currently do.
Right. I mean, like what you've mentioned, what he's asking for seems very straightforward in terms of the benefits to the electoral process in Nigeria, and then you wonder why for there to be a legislation for that. However, they keep on asking for this, they keep on calling for this. Let's see if they'll be responded to.
Messages. Dr. I says on WhatsApp, good morning. Is Akpabio an ex-Niger Delta governor facing corruption charges now not being critical? Sorry, I'm not impressed, Dr. I. A couple of people are not either. MI from Akoka says, one of the things that made the NDDC so corrupt and ineffective these were allegations that every attempt at a holistic probe or audit was followed by militant unrest, and since the federal government needed the golden goose to continue laying those eggs, they looked away.
that way.
And Taya from Yaba says Akpabio calls for audits. I hope the audit covers his tenure. After a while, it would be called witch
Witch
hunt.
hunt.
Interesting.
All right. Edward Uche says, I hope the Niger Deltans can hear that the serving and past political leaders, they often lay their lives for during elections are the sources of their harsh living conditions. Thank you for your comments. Please keep them coming. We'll try to take in as many as possible. Please plan 750 billion naira homes for officers, others nationwide. Guardian newspaper reports this. We have that there's a housing scheme that is being launched by the Nigeria Police Force to ameliorate the housing challenges facing its rank and file across the country. When you read the headline, it looks like a great initiative because we've talked about the welfare of the police officers in Nigeria for a while now. What do you think about this?
I think it's a brilliant idea. It's good news to hear. But looking at it, I think there should be two aspects of it. One of the aspects is to be able to get some of the officers or even some of their lower ranked of officers to ensure that at the end of the day, when they're retiring, they can have a home or something like that after retiring from the police force. The other part of it should be building standard police barracks where people retire, they can move out to their own places. I see it as a good scheme because it's been done before in Nigeria. It's been done before in Lagos. A lot of the so-called Jakonde estates that you see across Lagos, it came through a special housing arrangement with developers and mortgage schemes that were paid over time. So I think it's a brilliant idea. Um, the only thing I need to ask the police is at 700, they're looking at about 100,000. What's the cost to each person who is going to pay? Because they're looking at a 25-year mortgage. For those who don't have up to 25 years in service, how do they go about it? How do you ameliorate a lot of all these things? How do they get monies to pay for these things? So these are the things that they need to really sit down and work out and think about. But I think it's a fantastic idea, and it would create better living conditions for people, and then people can actually, members of the police force can look forward to having something that come there through the different scheme, either rent to pay or through a mortgage process, rent to own, sorry, or a mortgage process that you can pay over time. But like I said, it's been done in Nigeria, and it's a brilliant idea.
Right.
Comrade Insikan sent in a message on Twitter. He said it's a good thing that this is coming from Senator Akpabio because the former chairman of NDDC is the person he, Akpabio, pushed forward as the gubernatorial candidate in the last election in Akwa Ibom. Let Akpabio ask him directly in bulk.
All right. Thank you very much. We have from the Punch newspaper, payroll system this today. ASU takes battle to National Assembly, meet Lawan Baja. Just in case you've not been following the news on the payroll system, so the president gave an order that ASU, before salaries are paid, they must come under the integrated payroll and personnel information system to avoid paying ghost workers, to ensure that the system works more efficiently. However, ASU kicked against this last week. We saw that they said they didn't agree to this. They gave a number of reasons for this, one of which is that their salaries will be delayed because the process hasn't been very efficient from the authorities' point of view. So take us through this now. They're saying they're still not backing down. They're taking the battle or they're taking it to National Assembly. Let's hear about this, please.
Yeah, they're not backing down because this is what ASU has. Look, ASU and our universities and the guys who work within them, especially the lecturers, and there are multiple unions within universities, but ASU is probably the most prominent that we know. ASU as a union and as individuals in that union have suffered, right? Let's through the years, it's one of the years of neglect of our university systems have told directly on the people that work there, and obviously the quality of people that system has retained, right? And over the years, that dearth. This is no affront on people, the caliber of lecturers that we have.
Yes.
But often, in summary, this kind of argument is not what I would have expected from academics.
Yes.
Right. And it's the years of neglect and, should I say, there's no other word, destroying the institution our learning institutions as what has brought us here. Now, this payroll system, like you said,
Yes.
is to quite simply plug holes. Ghost workers, people who shouldn't be on the payroll. Shouldn't it then therefore be something of national interest? And ASU, if it played its role properly, should be one of the institutions, and well, they're not the only ones failing in this, but one of the institutions lending their voice on national matters,
Yes.
right? Pushing for the right things to be done. We all know the huge problems we have with ghost workers and people on payroll that shouldn't be on payroll, people collecting multiple salaries. You would think that is something that ASU should push and champion. Now, what are the arguments? The arguments are, look, it would duplicate, the efforts of the university's governing council. What's wrong with them adopting? It's a platform. So if they have something, I doubt they do, but if they carry out some of these functions, why don't they use the platform as well? Right, instead of wanting to do their own, thing, the government has said, look, use this platform. Let's all people that I need to pay, as long as I pay you. I mean, you can say the arguments are they're an independent institution.
Yes.
They shouldn't be brought on this, but the government still pays you, right?
But how about Tunde? Let's talk about what they also said, because this is important. It says that they say one of the reasons they're kicking against this as well is because it negates the law on university autonomy. Now, we know that with regards to this government, they've been criticized for not respecting autonomy with the judiciary and number of
My
other
response to that is
institutions.
very simple. Who
Yeah.
pays you?
Yeah,
For you
pays
to
your
for you to
salary.
say you're autonomous, pay
Yes.
yourself.
Yeah.
It's
If
a
you're not
problem generally.
if you're not paying yourself, you're not autonomous. It's quite simple.
That's another conversation.
It-
Because
it- pays you.
Just one last thing. One of the things they said is that once you're over 60, you're no longer being paid. If that's the retirement age in what's it called, one of the things that you find out is that a lot of these lecturers have payrolls in different universities at the same time.
Yeah.
Now, if you're doing any part-time work in any other university, let the university generate its funds and pay you for
Yeah.
that. It's not the government that should pay you a salary in Unilag or UI at the same time.
All right. Thank you, Adi. Thank you, Tunde. Have this comment here. The Ways panel report already recommended the unbundling of INEC to make the body independent and create different bodies for investigating electoral issues, prosecute electoral issues, and organize election. But INEC itself has always blocked its unbundling for reasons known but unspoken. A specialized court is not the solution.
Now they're asking for unbundling.
Speaking to the ASU issue, Prince sent in this message on WhatsApp, said the ASU people are afraid of losing illegal salaries and payments they receive from different government institutions where they lecture, apart from the original employment, which is against public service.
That's it.
Which is what
There's a
just
lot
said.
of corruption in that place. That's not
Yep.
like.
All right, let's move on. Talking about corruption, though, money is a major issue, and we have to consider it, especially looking ahead to 2020. On the 2020 budget, BPE, that's the Bureau of Public Enterprises, they said they may throw more redundant public assets for sale next year for it to meet its 2020 fiscal budget funding pegged at 447 billion naira. And this is a statement credited to the Director General, Mr. Alex Oko. Your thoughts on this, Wadi?
The right thing to do. Exactly the right thing to do. Over the years, we've been saddled with so many government institutions and commissions that are no longer working. They're redundant. They have buildings. Some of them, they even have staff. The buildings are dilapidating. If you need to sell off some of these things to earn money for redundant organizations that are no longer functional, then please do it. Why keep them and you're maintaining them? It's costing you money to maintain. People need these things to some of these buildings to be able to do their own work. So I think it's not new with BPE. This is part of the ways they fund their activities and the government every year. So you look at the assets that are no longer generating revenue to the government and sell them. So I think it's just the right thing to do.
Yes, it seems like the right thing to do. It seems like the right rhetoric. But would this make any difference? It's not hard to look for clear examples of projects that have been abandoned or government properties that have been lying redundant from even the day they were created.
Yeah,
Ajakuta still is one. It's not so far.
But you see, one of the things I've realized, and having spoken to quite a number of people, and people who have also tried to to go through this process of bidding for government assets.
Yeah.
A lot of people in government don't want to take responsibility for disposing these assets, even if they are not working. The issue is, why would it be me to sell it? But if there's the Bureau for Public Enterprises can do that, then they should just go ahead and do it. Why? Because one, you generate money for you to be able to do the things that you need to do. Two, those things will be used properly and more efficiently by the people who pay for them. Because I'm not going to pay, like you said, you're trying to generate over 400 billion. Last year was 220 billion, but they could only raise by 85 billion. So if I'm going to pay 400, cover 400 billions from wherever, whether from my pocket or from loans that I take, of course I'm going to ensure that I use those things properly.
So I asked that question earlier because make these moves and actually affect, it's going beyond paper and beyond statements to acting. And do they have the right powers? A clear example, look at Camp Nou. Camp Nou is privately managed, and they make so much profit every year, so much so that they can fund UNICEF by themselves.
Yeah.
The National Stadium has been a conversation for a long time. The last time there was a push for it to be privatized, there was a whole lot of kickback.
Yeah, and
so who now makes that decision to finally actually implement the privatization of such assets?
It's the whole of government, So it's not just BP saying this is what we're going to sell or this is not what we're going to sell. The government as an institution looks at all the assets that they have, and they look at the ones that they feel are most redundant, and then they put it up for sale through the BP. So they would sit down with the BP, and the BP will advise them on all the different areas and all the different redundant assets, and say, okay, let's try this and sell them. So like I said, the National Stadium is been on the cloud for the last 5-6 years, and nobody is saying anything, and it's just dilapidating there.
All right, thank you.
All right, so we have, going back now, Mansorin says, truth is Akpabio was never in charge of NDDC and should not be held responsible for activities in the past. Granted, he could have raised issues in the past, but this is his time to take action from within that commission. Just another perspective on that issue. Thank you very much, Mansorin. Dari says, question, should BP be selling to make money for its operations? Should the funds from privatization be paid directly into the federal coffers? BPE should get its fundings from budget.
Let's move on to...
Sorry, just to correct that. It's not to fund itself. It's part of what the government is going to use in its budget. That's the BPE contribution to it.
All right. The newspaper has this next report. The Socio-Economic Rights and Accountability Project has taken the government on account, really, regarding details of spending on failed $460 million CCTV projects and other Chinese loans they've taken. Questioning how these monies were implemented or how they were used. We know of a number of contracts that have been awarded without any results. They're saying they really need to address this situation for the interest of the citizens. Your thoughts on this, Tunde?
I keep saying this, and I will continue to say that. I wonder what we'll do without social society, with organizations like SERAP, when we have other institutions arguing about payroll systems.
Shade.
Look, the Chinese are just perfect partners for opaque administrations across Africa, right? African administrations, Nigeria including, probably leading in that space. It's difficult to get information around what has happened and the agreements that they enter into. And then when you go to the other side to go and do, maybe say you want to go and do some investigative journalism, imagining, stomping the streets of all institutions in China trying to get information, is similarly, it's just as opaque and probably more more perilous than it is here. So it's perfect. Sarah centers this story centers around two things. The $460 million that was awarded for the CCTV, and I think it's come up once or twice this week already.
Yes, it has.
CCTV contract last week, yeah. And then imagine the irony of this: the 1.5 billion naira, which is now which obviously is failed, that was paid in 2010 for the construction of the conduct of headquarters of the conduct of
Code of Conduct Bureau.
The Code of Conduct Bureau. Imagine that, right? The Code of Conduct Bureau itself, headquarters, money was received for it, and it hasn't been done. And the truth is, it's we take loans out for these contracts. We don't get the benefits because they're not delivered, but then we're saddled with the repayments and the interest on top of it, right? It's totally unfair. We're leaving a debt for generations unborn. I mean, how are we going to get ourselves out of this? It, look at the timing on CCTV1. This was 2010. When did we have an election? 2020.
Oh, before that?
Yeah,
2011.
2011. The next year,
Yeah.
2010, 2011. Right? Can we see the link? Let's start to look at it. And then Serap starts to mention something very important. That look, we don't need to take these loans in the first place. Why do we? We have an opaque 617 million that's allocated to annually to security votes that cannot be investigated, cannot be checked. Right? It really. And how was it spent? If we're a bit more serious with ourselves, we won't need to go and seek loans of this type. When we throw things into a hole and we call it for the sake of security and security vote, and nobody can look at it.
Very interesting stories there. Thank you very much, Tunde, for your analysis. Now, PENCOM is back in the news. There are a few threats, not threats, but really putting consequences to failure of the PFAs, Pension Fund Administrators, in this story from the Punch newspaper. PENCOM to penalize PFAs for benefits wrongly paid. In one instance, they say a lot of pensioners have been reporting to PENCOM that their monies, their packages have been paid to their next of kin while they're still alive, which is quite strange.
While they are presumed dead.
I mean, so they're saying that some of these errors will be borne by the PFAs, but tell us how it goes beyond this.
Which is rightly so. The process of paying a next of kin can come through two ways, either through a duly signed will by the person who dies, or through a letter of administration from the courts. And whichever way it is, there are people who administer these things. So it's not just the beneficiaries of a will have administrators who manage that will. Aside, once manage the estates of the dead person, and if there is no will, you go through a court process to prove that the person is dead, and then you submit your letter of administration. Now, I've been through this myself, and I know what it took. So it's amazing that if the PFA is not properly investigating these things, if you bring me a letter of administration, there's so many ways to check it. It must be registered in court. You must have to go to court and go and find out if this letter was issued from the court. You must also find out if these administrators really are the right beneficiaries. Why? How? By calling these people within that family to find out if this is agreed upon and has been signed and agreed. And it's the same thing with the will. So if they cannot just put their controls in proper put controls in place properly, then I think they should pay they should bear the losses that go to these people. How can someone be alive and you cannot find out just by making a call or visiting the man's house to find out if he's alive, and then you pay it to a beneficiary? It's really amazing, and I'm happy PENCON is doing this. And the earlier you start to penalize the PFAs, the better for everybody.
Okay. I'm glad you mentioned the court aspect, because I was wondering if the probate registry has records of all these wills that are submitted. I'm sure there are structures in place to grant these wills, or grant the letter of administration.
Oh yes, there.
Should it signify some level of corruption between the PFAs and
it could, and it maybe not corruption. It could just be pure negligence. You don't take your time to do your due diligence to ensure that you check these things up.
Thank
you. On the police housing scheme, we have this comment from Martin. Nice idea, but with our present policing structure, it would be difficult to work out. A policeman serving in Maiduguri and allocated housing there could end up serving in Calabar. State leasing is the first step.
Interesting. Yes. We'll back to that. And that from Ikoyi says, good morning. I'm not sure why we think selling our assets to meet budgetary demands is a good idea. The government is overtaxing us, spending funds like a train on recurrent expenditures, borrowing for fun, and now we want to sell. To what end? What's the plan for 2020 budget? or 2021
21.
budget, maybe we will sell some states. Ada, suggest.
It's just amazing how the language has changed from when this administration started saying, "Oh, we're going to deprioritize recurring income. We're going to focus on infrastructure and the things that will take us out of
Poverty.
Look
And
where we are now.
Exactly, and we have a revenue generation problem.
Yeah,
not a debt
not
service.
the
Yes.
problem. Yeah,
That's very
obviously,
important.
clearly very important.
And then Ismail Oriomi says, really, ASU is not on IPIS. I can confirm to you that more than one lecturer receives salaries from multiple universities, and they do one crazy scam called adjunct lecturer. In fact, I know of a lecturer that celebrated his 70th birthday 2 years ago and still lectures and gets paid. They're not a friend of the government, and once you earn from the government, then you abide by your employer's law and policy. Aruna. However, some people have also challenged the thoughts on them not being autonomous, saying that then we could say that the judiciary is not autonomous because INEC and judiciary, because a number of these agencies still get their funding from the government. But,
but you see the difference on autonomy is like in the judiciary, and even though you get paid, you determine. It's the same way the legislature determines how much they spend. So even if the money is coming from the coffers, you determine. It's not the government.
Yes.
Do you understand?
All right, thank you so much for your comments. Thank you. A big thanks to our analysts this morning. Thank you, Tunde Okufi at Big Coops on Twitter and Wade Ahime at Reinc Nigeria on Twitter. And thanks to all our listeners. Don't forget to take the conversation further at 9 a.m. where we get your comments mainly for Lagos Talks 981. Right now, we're going to break. When we come back, it'll be time for the Locker Room 981 where we talk sports. Stay tuned.
The headlines, the stories,